That's what you get for standing in a Marine's way, sweetheart. This line's for people who earned it. The tray hit the deck before the laughter started. A clatter of stainless steel on polished concrete. Mashed potatoes across the floor. A cup rolling in a slow half-circle until it stopped against a table leg. 400 Marines at lunch, and for one breath, the room turned to look at the woman who had just lost her meal to a sergeant's shoulder. Sergeant Cole Renner did not slow down. He was 26, broad through the chest, loud by habit, and he ran the chow line at the center of the dining facility, the way a man runs a thing he believes belongs to him. He had clipped her tray on the way past, and he wanted the room to see it. He turned, walked backward 2 steps, and grinned at the table of junior Marines behind him. The woman did not flinch. That was the first thing. A tray goes down in a crowded mess hall, and a civilian jumps, apologizes, looks for someone to blame or someone to help. She did none of it. She looked at the spill the way an engineer looks at a crack, measuring it, and then she crouched. One knee, one unhurried motion. She stacked the tray, set the cup back on it, squared the whole thing level on the floor, and only then did she stand. She was perhaps 40, in plain dark slacks, and a gray-collared shirt with no insignia, a visitor badge clipped at her hip that read, in small letters, Ms. Marchetti, Training Observer. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her hands were steady. There was a small pin on her collar, pale blue, no larger than a shirt button, the kind of thing a busy room would never notice. A civilian, the room decided. A contractor. Somebody's visiting auditor, here to count the forks and write a report and go home. Nobody in 400 Marines looked twice, and that was how she had wanted it. The whole point of the gray shirt and the borrowed name was that a place shows you its real face only when it does not think anyone important is watching. She was seeing that face now, on the floor, in mashed potatoes and laughter. "You hear me?" Renner said. "I said the real line's that way. This one's for Marines." "Understood," she said. One word. Flat. No heat in it and no fear. She did not look at him the way people looked at him. She looked past him, briefly, at the 2 exits, the main doors and the kitchen pass, and then back, and the look she gave him was the look you give weather. Something that would pass. At the serving line, Master Sergeant Owen Castellano stopped wiping the counter. He was 47, and he had spent 20 of those years inside dining facilities like this one, on 3 continents, and he had learned to read a room the way other men read terrain. He had watched the tray go down. He had watched the woman not react, and now he watched her choose her seat. Not the open table near the doors, not the empty stretch by the windows, but the chair in the far corner, with its back to the wall and a clean sight line to both ways out. She sat the way some men sit, weight centered, spine off the chair back, eyes up. Castellano set his rag down. Renner was still performing. He spread his hands for his audience. "Some people wander onto a base and think it's a museum," he said. "Lost civilian lady, probably here to count our forks." The table laughed. One of them, a lance corporal named Diego Reyes, 20 years old and 3 months out of the School of Infantry, laughed too, and then half rose because the woman had bent again to wipe the floor with a napkin, and something about that made his stomach turn over. "Sit down, Reyes," Renner said, without looking. Reyes sat. The woman finished wiping the floor. She carried the soiled napkins to the bin herself. She took a fresh tray from the stack, moved through the line without a word, accepted what she was given, and returned to the corner chair. She did not eat fast. She did not eat slow. She ate at a set, deliberate pace, the pace of someone who had learned in hard places to finish a meal because the next one was never promised, and her eyes moved across the room in a slow circuit. Doors, clock, the sergeant, the doors again, every 90 seconds, like a watch hand, Castellano had seen that pin once before. Once in 20 years. On a retired gunnery sergeant at a change of command in a different decade. A small, pale blue rosette that the man wore on his lapel and never spoke about. And Castellano had asked an officer what it meant. And the officer had gone quiet and said, "You stand up when that walks in, Master Sergeant. You stand up, and you don't sit down until he tells you to." He looked at the woman in the corner, at the pale blue pin, at the way the whole room moved around her without seeing her. He reached for the phone on the wall. The pallet jack came around the end of the serving line too fast. A young Marine on the kitchen detail had it loaded with a stack of empty milk crates, and he was pushing it at a clip because Renner had told him to clear the floor before the next wave, and he did not see Reyes step into the lane to bus his tray. The jack's steel corner swung toward the boy's knee. A hand caught the top crate flat and stopped the stack dead. "Chalk it," the woman said. "Heel first." She had crossed 4 feet of floor in the time it took the jack to roll one. Her palm was flat on the crates, her weight already braced low, and she had stopped 200 pounds of rolling steel without seeming to strain. The kitchen Marine froze. Reyes stepped back out of the lane. "Heel first," she said again, evenly, and nodded at the jack's brake. The boy dropped the heel of the lever. The wheels locked. It was 3 words and a hand, and it was the kind of correction that does not come from a visitor. It came from someone who had run floors where a rolling jack was the difference between a clean shift and a crushed foot, who knew the word chalk and used it without thinking, who had stood watch over enough young people doing dangerous, boring work to make the save before the accident finished forming. Castellano was beside her now. He had come down off the serving line. "You've run a galley," he said. "Not a question, quite." "Something like it," she said. She set the crate back on the stack, squared it, and stepped out of the lane. He marked the deflection. People who had run a galley said so. They told you which mess, which ship, which year, the way sailors and Marines always did. She had given him 3 words and a closed door, and she had given them in the clipped, economical register of someone for whom words were a resource to be spent carefully. He let his eyes travel the floor the way hers had, and now that he was looking, he saw what she had already seen. The fire door at the far end was propped with a folded cardboard wedge, a violation, a door that was supposed to close and seal held open for the convenience of a smoke break. The accountability clipboard on the wall by the cooler showed temperature logs in a single even hand, every reading neat, every reading inside limits, every reading initialed at intervals no human being actually walked. Logs that pretty were logs nobody was keeping. Somebody was filling them in at the end of the week from a chair. It unsettled him that she had found it first, and faster, and from a corner table, while pretending to mind her water glass. A facility inspector with a clipboard would have taken an hour and a checklist to surface what she had surfaced in the time it took to eat half a meal. That was not the eye of a person who counted forks. That was the eye of a person who had stood watch over places where a propped door or a false log wasn't a write-up, but a funeral, where the difference between a sealed hatch and a propped one, between a real count and a comfortable lie, was measured in people who came home or did not. He filed that thought next to the pale blue pin and did not like the shape the two of them made together. "How long's that door been propped?" Castellano said, half to himself. "Since before I sat down," the woman said. "The wedge is worn. It lives there." He looked at her. She was not looking at the door. She was looking at her water glass, which she turned a precise quarter turn on the table, and her face gave away nothing at all. Renner came back through, irritated. The civilian was still here, and worse, she was up, touching his floor, and the master sergeant was talking to her like she mattered. He did not like the arithmetic of that. He stepped between them with his chest. "Master Sergeant, you don't have to babysit the tourist," Renner said. "She was just leaving." Was she? Castellano said. She's a civilian on my deck with no escort, Renner said, loud enough for the nearest tables. That's a security thing. I'll handle it. He turned to the woman. You. Wait here. Don't touch anything else. The woman sat back down in the corner chair. She folded her hands. She waited, exactly as told, with the terrible patience of someone who had waited in far worse places. And Castellano felt the back of his neck go cold, because he had now seen that pale blue pin twice in his life, and both times the world had rearranged itself around the person wearing it within the hour. He stepped back toward the wall phone. He had a call to make that a sergeant was not going to like. Renner made it a show. That was his mistake, though he would not understand it for another 20 minutes. A man who is sure of his ground does not need an audience. Renner needed one. He pulled 2 of his Marines into it, told the story loud, walked the length of the table so the back rows could hear. The lost civilian, the tray, how he'd set her straight. Somebody at the end of the table held up a phone, filming, and Renner played to it. Give her a name, someone said, laughing. Clipboard, Renner said. Inspector Clipboard. Here to count our spoons. The table chanted at once, the way bored young men will chant anything, and the woman in the corner became a joke with a nickname, which is the oldest way a group has of deciding a person does not count. She let it happen. She did not redden, did not stiffen, did not look at the phone. Instead, her eyes finished another slow circuit of the room. The name tapes on the 2 loudest Marines. The time on the wall clock, 12:41. The propped fire door. The camera in the corner of the ceiling. The real one, the facility zone. Its small black dome aimed down the serving line. She read the room the way she had read the spill, taking inventory, and every item she logged, without moving anything but her eyes. It was a skill that had kept her alive on 4 continents, and it did not switch off because the room was friendly or the threat was only a loud man with a lunch tray. She knew which Marines would freeze and which would move. She knew the door behind the serving line led to a kitchen and a loading dock with a roll-up 3/4 down. None of it was fear. It was inventory, the habit of a person who had survived by always knowing, in any room, exactly where the exits were and exactly who could be counted on. The nickname spread the way these things spread, table to table, carried by people who had not seen the tray go down and only knew that there was a joke, and the joke had a name. Inspector Clipboard. That was the machinery of it, a group deciding in real time that a person was a thing you were allowed to laugh at, each laugh giving the next one permission. She had seen the same machinery in worse forms, in worse places. It was not cruelty exactly. It was belonging, the cheap kind, the kind you buy by agreeing about who is beneath you. A staff sergeant passing through with his tray paused at the noise. Renner, ease off. She's done nothing. Staff sergeant, respectfully, it's my floor, Renner said. I've got it. The staff sergeant looked at the woman, looked at Renner, decided it was not worth his lunch, and moved on. That was the thing about a man like Renner. He was loud enough, and sure enough, that reasonable people stepped around him rather than through him. It had worked for years. It was working now. And it was, at this exact moment, walking him toward the edge of a cliff he could not see. That, Castellano thought, was how it always went. Not one great act of cruelty, but 100 small permissions. A staff sergeant who decided it was not worth his lunch. A table that chanted a nickname because chanting was easier than thinking. A facility that let a fire door stay propped because closing it was a nuisance, and let a log get written from a chair because checking it was a chore. Small surrenders, each one reasonable on its own, and a man like Renner grew in exactly the space those surrenders left him. He had watched it happen on this floor for 2 years. He had let it happen, a little, himself. He did not intend to let it happen for the next 10 minutes. Castellano drifted closer to the corner table, close enough to stand between the woman and the room if he had to. He did not know yet what he was protecting. He only knew that the pale blue pin meant he was protecting something the whole building would owe a debt to once it understood, and that the understanding was coming, whether Renner wanted it or not. Stop here for a moment. Somewhere in your own life, there has been a person everyone in the room was happy to laugh at. The quiet one, the new one, the one who didn't fit the picture. And somewhere in your own life, you have watched a loud man decide that quiet meant weak. If that memory just rose in you, hold on to it, because the floor of this mess hall is about to tilt, and the people laughing are about to learn what they were laughing at. If stories about exactly that turn make something settle right in your chest, subscribe to Honor Tales and stay with this one. You will want to be here for the next 90 seconds. The woman turned her water glass another quarter turn. "Inspector Clipboard," Renner called across the floor, grinning. "You still with us?" "Still here," she said. 2 words. And the strange thing, the thing Reyes noticed and could not explain, was that they did not sound like surrender. They sounded like a clock being checked. Still here. As in, not yet. As in, soon. Reyes stopped laughing. He looked at the woman, really looked, at the stillness of her, at the pale blue pin he could not place, and a small cold thought arrived in him that he was on the wrong side of something he did not understand. Renner went to the wall phone and called the duty desk. He narrated as he dialed, loud, for the room. "Yeah, this is Sergeant Renner at the dining facility. I've got an unescorted civilian female on the deck, refusing to leave, interfering with operations. Possible security concern." He paused. He embellished. "She's been photographing the serving area." She had not. "I want her removed." The duty desk asked for the name on the badge. "Says Marchetti," Renner said. "Some kind of observer pass, probably expired." It wasn't expired. He had not looked at it closely enough to know. The woman heard all of it. She did not move to defend herself. She did not produce the badge, did not demand a phone, did not ask for a name or a supervisor. She sat with her hands folded and let the machine run, because she understood something Renner did not, that a false report, made loudly on a recorded line in front of a facility's own camera, was not a weapon being used against her. It was a man building a case against himself, brick by brick, and the kindest thing she could do was let him keep laying bricks. At the duty desk, something went sideways in the conversation. The voice on the other end changed. Renner's grin slipped a half-inch. "What do you mean someone's already?" "No, I'm telling you. She's a civilian." A pause. "Who's inbound?" "Inbound for what?" Another pause, longer. He pressed the phone harder to his ear, and whatever name was said into it, he did not catch it, or he caught it, and his mind refused it, and he hung up with the particular stiffness of a man who has been told something he intends to ignore. Castellano, 10 feet away, had been busy too. With his own phone, low against his chest, he had photographed the propped fire door and the too perfect log. He was not interfering. He was preserving. He had spent 2 years suspecting that the small, ordinary corruption on this floor, the line privileges that got sold, the gear that went missing, the logs that were written from a chair, ran back to one sergeant, and he had never been able to prove the shape of it. Now, a woman with a pale blue pin had walked into the middle of it and frozen, like a witness who knew exactly how long to stand still for the camera, and Castellano had decided to make sure the camera saw everything. He understood, watching her, that she had handed him the case without saying a word. A false report on a recorded line, an order to a junior Marine to stand down from a simple kindness. A door, a log, a pattern. She had not asked Renner a single hostile question. She had simply declined to leave, declined to defend herself, declined to give him anything except the silence in which a careless man condemns himself. 2 years Castellano had reached for this and come up empty. A stranger had handed it to him in 20 minutes by doing nothing at all, and the doing nothing was the most disciplined thing he had ever watched a human being accomplish. Reyes crossed the floor with a fresh tray. He set it down in front of the woman, quietly, not looking at Renner. "Ma'am," he said, "yours went over. Take mine." "Reyes," Renner barked. "Sit down, now." Reyes flinched, but he did not pick the tray back up. He left it where it was. A small thing. A tray of food slid across a table by a 20-year-old who could not have told you why he did it. And he sat back down, and the woman looked at him for the first time, a look that lasted half a second and weighed a great deal. "Thank you," she said. 2 words again, but warmer than anything she had spent on Renner. Reyes felt it land somewhere under his ribs. Renner crossed the floor. He was past patient now, past the show, into the place where a certain kind of man decides the only thing left is to put hands on the problem and make it move. The duty desk had unsettled him. Someone inbound. He did not understand it, and he did not like not understanding it, and the not liking was turning, in him, into the need to finish this before whoever was inbound arrived. He stopped at her table and pointed at the door. "You're done," he said. "You're leaving. On your feet." The woman looked up at him. She did not get up. "I'd sit down, Sergeant," she said, "while you still can." It was the most she had said to him. 6 words. And there was nothing in them but a flat, almost gentle warning, the tone a person uses to tell you the bridge ahead is out. Renner heard only the defiance. His face went tight. Across the building, in the command suite, a phone rang on a sergeant major's desk, and a master sergeant's voice said 6 words that put a 2-star general on his feet. "Sir, you need to come down." Castellano kept his voice low, his back to the room, the phone tight to his jaw. The sergeant major asked him what this was about, and Castellano told him plainly. "There's a woman in my dining facility. Civilian clothes, observer badge, name of Marchetti, and she's wearing a Medal of Honor rosette on her collar." A silence on the line. "I've seen one before, Sergeant Major. I know what it is. If she's who that pin says she is, you want the general down here before one of my sergeants does something this base can't take back." The line went quiet for the length of a breath. Then the sergeant major said a name Castellano had only ever read in a citation years ago, the kind of citation they make you read at the schoolhouse. And Castellano felt the floor tilt under him properly for the first time. "He's coming," the sergeant major said. "Keep her safe for 90 seconds, whatever it takes." Castellano hung up and turned back to the room. 90 seconds. He looked at Renner, who was standing over the corner table with his finger pointed at the door, and he started moving. He had been a master sergeant for 9 years and a Marine for 25, and in that time, he had learned the difference between a person who threatened and a person who simply was. Renner threatened. He filled the air with himself because he was not sure of the ground. But the woman at the table, she had not raised her voice once, had not stood when ordered, had not defended herself against a false report. And every one of those refusals had been a choice made by someone with nothing left to prove. Castellano had spent the lunch hour watching a sergeant try to establish dominance over the one person in the building who had never once, in her adult life, needed to establish it over anyone. There was a lesson in it that he would carry to his own grave, and it was this: the people who have truly been tested almost never advertise it. The loud ones, The ones who run a floor like a kingdom and need you to watch them do it are loud precisely because the question of what they are made of has never been answered, and the not knowing eats at them. The quiet ones already have their answer. They paid for it somewhere you cannot see, and the receipt is folded up small and pinned to a collar where a busy room will never notice it, and they do not need you to know. Renner had spent his whole career trying to look like the kind of Marine that the woman in the corner simply was. He was about to learn the difference in front of 400 witnesses, and Castellano felt no pity for him, only the grim arithmetic of a thing that had been coming for 2 years, finally arriving on schedule. He reached the table as Renner leaned in. "Sergeant," Castellano said, "step back." "Master Sergeant, with respect." "That wasn't a request, Sergeant. Step back from her." For a moment it hung there. The Master Sergeant, the Sergeant, the silent woman between them. And the room had gone quiet enough now that the noise was draining out of it row by row, tables falling still as the people at them felt, without knowing why, that something was about to happen. The phone camera at the end of the table was still up. It was still filming. It would film everything. And in the corner chair, the woman unfolded her hands and set them flat on the table, and she breathed out. Slow, the way a person does at the end of a long wait, because she could hear it now. The main doors at the far end of the dining facility opening, and the particular silence that follows a flag officer into a room, rolling toward them across 400 Marines, like a wave finding a shore. She did not need to be who she was. Understand that. She did not need the room. For 15 years, she had carried what this pale blue pin cost her, and had asked the world for nothing in return. And she would have walked out of this mess hall and onto her flight, without a word if the sergeant had only let her go. Who she was about to reorder this entire room in the time it takes to read a sentence, and she took no pleasure in it. If you have ever waited, quiet and unbothered, while someone louder than you mistook your silence for weakness, stay with Honor Tales for what comes next, and subscribe, because the doors are already open. Renner did not hear the doors. He heard only that a master sergeant had taken the civilian side, and it broke something loose in him. She turned her water glass a final quarter turn, and the mess hall went away. It was 2011. She was a captain then, 27 years old, and the valley near the eastern border was the kind of ground that did not forgive a single bad minute. Her element had moved into it at first light, to clear a route the convoys could not, and the ambush came down on them from 3 sides at once at 1100 hours, a hammer of fire off the high walls, and the first man went down in the open before anyone understood the shape of it. He was a rifleman named Owens, hit in the leg, dragging himself toward a rock that was not big enough, 80 meters out across ground, that every weapon on the ridge could see. The textbook said, "Suppress and wait." The textbook was written by men who had never watched a 20-year-old try to crawl on a leg that no longer worked. Captain Marchetti put 2 squads on the ridge to make the enemy keep their heads down, and then she went out across the 80 meters herself, low and fast, and she got her hands into Owens's drag straps, and she brought him back. The wall behind her came apart in dust the whole way. She did not get hit. She would never be able to explain why. That was the first time. The second time was for Whitfield. Corporal Jonah Whitfield was 21, the cheerful one, the one who carried other people's loads up the hills without being asked, and he had pushed forward to pull security on the casualty collection point when the second volley caught him. He went down 40 meters out on the wrong side of a low stone wall, and the volume of fire over that ground was a solid thing now, and every instinct she had trained into her people screamed that no one survives crossing that twice. She went anyway. She crossed the 40 meters, with rounds breaking the stone beside her into white chips, and she reached him, and she got a hand on his vest, and dragged him into the lee of the wall. He was alive when she reached him. That was the part she carried. He looked up at her, and he said her name. Not her rank, her name. And she pressed her hands over the wound, and she told him the lie you tell, that he was fine, that the bird was inbound, that she had him. The bird was inbound. She did have him, and it was not enough. The wound was past anything a hand could hold, and Jonah Whitfield died in the lee of a stone wall in a valley with his captain's hands on his chest, 15 years and a lifetime ago, and she had held the position with what was left of her element until the helicopters came and took the living and the dead away together. They gave her the Medal of Honor for the 80 meters and the 40 meters and the holding of the line. A light blue ribbon, 13 white stars, draped at the throat in a room full of people standing at attention. She had stood there and accepted it, and thought, the entire time, about the one she had not brought home. She did not wear the medal. She wore the small rosette, the discreet one, pale blue on her collar, where a busy room would never notice it. Not as a trophy, but as a tally, a thing she touched sometimes with one finger, a way of carrying Jonah Whitfield's name into every room she entered, so that he went where she went. People thought a medal like that was a thing you wore for yourself, and so they expected its owner to want it seen. They had the whole shape of it backward. The recipients she had known wore the small pin and not the medal for exactly the reason she did. Because the thing around your neck on that ribbon does not belong to you. It belongs to the people who did not come back, and the ones who put their hands in your drag straps and pulled when you could not pull yourself, and the young corporal who said your name instead of your rank with the last of his breath. You carry it the way you carry a name into a room, quietly, without explanation, and you let people knock your tray to the floor and call you Inspector Clipboard, because none of that touches the thing the pin is really for, and the only people whose opinion of you matters in that regard are already gone. She had made colonel 2 years back. She was 42 now, slated to take command of this very base's training pipeline, and she had come a week early and in plain clothes for one reason, to see the place honestly, the way it ran when no one was performing for a colonel, to find out whether the small unit instruction here was making Marines who could cross 80 meters for each other, or Marines who could not. She had learned a great deal at lunch. She had learned about a propped door and a false log, and a sergeant who sold the line. She had learned who moved to help a stranger, and who only laughed. The water glass settled, exactly level under her fingers. And across the dining facility, at the far end, the main doors opened, and a particular silence began to roll toward her across 400 Marines. Renner's hand closed on her arm. He hauled up on it, meaning to lift her out of the chair, meaning to march her to the door and be done with it before whoever was inbound arrived. And the moment his fingers gripped her upper arm, in front of 40 witnesses and a phone still filming, and the facility's own camera watching from the ceiling, he crossed the one line that turns a bad afternoon into a federal matter. He laid hands on her. She let him. There is a kind of restraint that costs more than action, and only people who have done terrible, necessary things in terrible places ever learn it. Anyone can swing. It takes nothing to swing. What it takes is to feel a hand close on you, to feel the old training light up every nerve with the clean arithmetic of how to break the grip and the man attached to it, and to choose, in that same half-second, to keep your hands at your sides, because a 26-year-old who does not understand what he is touching does not deserve to be destroyed for it. She had crossed 80 meters of open ground for a stranger. She could stand still inside a foolish man's grip for 10 more seconds. That was the thing the room would talk about for years. She let him grip her arm and pull, and she came up out of the chair under the pull because she chose to, not because he was strong enough to make her. and as she rose, she turned her face to his, and she smiled at him. The first time. A small, steady, almost kind smile. The smile of a person who has just watched someone step off a ledge they were warned about. "You should let go," she said. "Or what?" Renner said. He had her arm. He was a head taller and 40 pounds heavier, and he had her arm, and he did not feel, under his fingers, what Castellano could see. That she was utterly still inside his grip, her weight already set, her balance already low, that there were 6 distinct things she could do from exactly this position to put a 26-year-old sergeant on the floor without spilling her own water, and that she was choosing, in real time, to do none of them. The stillness was not the stillness of a victim. It was the stillness of a loaded thing that has decided not to fire. "Or what?" he said again, because she had not answered. And the not answering enraged him in the particular way that silence enrages a man who has built his whole standing on noise. He tightened his grip. He meant to feel her wince. He felt nothing, no resistance, no give, no fear, only a forearm like a cable under his fingers, and a pulse that had not changed its rhythm by a single beat. For the first time that afternoon, somewhere far down beneath the anger, Cole Renner felt the cold edge of a thought he could not afford, that he had read this completely, catastrophically wrong. Reyes was on his feet. "Sergeant," he started. Castellano moved in. "Renner, let her go. That's an order." But the general was faster than all of them. The doors at the far end stood open. The silence had reached the middle tables and was rolling on, and through it came a man in service uniform with 2 silver stars on each collar point, 54 years old, gray at the temples, moving at the unhurried pace of someone the entire institution rearranges itself around. Major General Walter Prentice, commanding the base. Behind him a sergeant major and an aide, both pale. He had crossed half the building in 90 seconds on the strength of a master sergeant's phone call and a name he had not heard spoken aloud in years. The room registered him in rows, the way a field registers wind. The Marines nearest the door stiffened first, the recognition rippling inward. General on deck, and trays were set down, and conversations died mid-word, and 400 young people began, without being told, to come up off the benches. But the general was not looking at them. His eyes had gone straight down the center aisle to the corner table, to the gray civilian shirt and the small, pale blue pin on its collar, and his pace did not break, and his face had set into something between awe and dread. He had seen the sergeant's hand on her arm from 40 feet away. He was already moving to put a stop to it. Renner felt the room change behind him before he understood why. He felt the noise drain, felt the air pull tight, and some animal part of him knew that whoever the duty desk had warned him about had arrived. But his hand was still locked on her arm, and a man in his position cannot simply let go and pretend, and so he held on a half-second too long, the half-second that would live forever on the facility's camera, as the most senior Marine on the installation bore down on him. He came down the center aisle, and he stopped 3 paces from the corner table, and he looked at the scene in front of him, a sergeant with his hand clamped on the arm of a woman in civilian clothes, and his eyes found the pale blue rosette on her collar, and his face changed. He said one word, quietly, and it carried to every corner of the silent room. "Colonel." Renner's hand was still on her arm, his head turned toward the general, slow, uncomprehending. "Sir," he said. "Sir, this is a civilian. She's—" "Take your hand off her," Prentice said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Something in the 4 words went past Renner's ears and into the part of a Marine that obeys before it understands, and Renner's fingers opened on their own and came off her arm as if it had gone hot. Prentice looked at the woman. "Colonel Lena Marchetti," he said. It was not a question. He had read her citation as a lieutenant colonel at the schoolhouse, the way they make you read it, and he had never imagined he would one day find its subject standing in his own mess hall in a gray civilian shirt, while one of his sergeants put hands on her. "Ma'am, I did not know you were on my base." "That was the idea, General," she said. "I wanted to see it honestly." Castellano's voice cut across the silence then, parade ground clear, the voice of a master sergeant who has waited his whole career to call exactly this. "Attention on deck!" 400 Marines came to their feet as one. The benches scraped, the trays went still, and the dining facility that had been laughing at Inspector Clipboard 90 seconds earlier stood rigid and silent. And then Major General Prentice, who outranked every living soul in that building, who answered to almost no one on this installation, squared himself to the woman in the gray civilian shirt, and he raised his hand to his brow, and he saluted her first. A 2-star general saluting a colonel, it made no sense by rank, and it made perfect sense by the only law that overrode rank, the oldest courtesy the service keeps. The Medal of Honor is saluted first, by everyone, generals included, regardless of grade. Prentice held the salute, and the word moved through the room in a rush of whispers. The pin, the neck ribbon she did not wear, the name, the citation. Medal of Honor. Medal of Honor. She's a recipient. And understanding rolled across 400 faces. Every officer in the room came to the salute and held it. Captains and a major near the windows, 2 lieutenants by the door, the staff sergeant who had told Renner to ease off, the senior NCOs along the serving line. Every hand that knew what that pale blue rosette meant came up to the brow and stayed there, holding in a silence so complete you could hear the propped fire door tick against its worn cardboard wedge. They were not saluting her rank. They were saluting the 80 meters and the 40 meters and a name on a stone wall in a valley 15 years gone. They were saluting the thing she had carried into the room so quietly that a sergeant had knocked it to the floor with a lunch tray, and Sergeant Cole Renner stood alone in the middle of it, the one man not at the salute because his arm would not obey him, and his face went through its stations one at a time. Confusion first. Why is the general saluting the tourist? Then disbelief. No, that pin. That can't be. Then recognition. The full and dreadful arrival of it. The citation he too had read at the schoolhouse and forgotten. The woman he had called Inspector Clipboard. The arm he had just gripped. And then horror. Plain and total, as he understood exactly what he had done, and exactly how many cameras had watched him do it. "Sir," Renner said. His voice cracked on the one syllable. "Sir, I didn't." "Be quiet, Sergeant," Prentice said, still holding the salute, his eyes on Marchetti. Colonel Marchetti looked at the room full of held salutes, the 400 standing Marines, the officers with their hands at their brows, the general in front of her, and for a moment, something crossed her face that was not triumph. It was the old weight. People always thought the salute was the reward. They thought this was the moment a story like hers was for. The room on its feet, the loud man undone, the truth arriving like weather. But she had not come for this, and she did not want it, and the held salutes did not feel to her like applause. They felt like the weight of every name the pin stood for, set down on her shoulders all at once in a crowded mess hall on an ordinary Tuesday. She would have traded the entire room, the general included, for 5 more minutes in the lee of a stone wall, with a corporal who was already gone. She raised her hand, once, precisely, and returned the salute to all of them at once, the way you return honors you never asked for, and she brought her hand down. Only then did the room breathe. "At ease," she said quietly. And then, to Prentice, "General, I think your master sergeant has something you'll want to see, and I think this sergeant should not leave the room." 2 military police met Renner at the doors. They were unhurried about it. There was nowhere for him to go, and everyone in the building knew it. And they walked him out past 400 Marines who did not look at him, which was its own kind of sentence. The reckoning took the rest of the afternoon, and it moved fast because the evidence had been sitting in plain sight all along. Castellano laid it out in the command suite. The photographs of the propped fire door, the temperature logs written in a single hand at impossible intervals, the months of small thefts and sold privileges he had suspected and never been able to anchor. And now, he had more than suspicion. He had a sergeant on the facility's own camera making a false security report on a recorded line, embellishing it, and then laying hands on a Medal of Honor recipient in front of 40 witnesses. Once investigators pulled the thread, the rest unraveled in a day. The incoming Marines who had been quietly charged for line privileges and billeting that were supposed to be free began to talk, now that the man they feared was in custody. The falsified logs traced back to a chair in Renner's office. The pattern Castellano had carried for 2 years finally had a shape, and the shape had a name, and the name was facing formal charges that would end a career and earn a cell. Marchetti gave her statement plainly and asked for nothing to be added to it. She did not embroider what Renner had done. She did not need to. The facts, read flat, were enough. Prentice offered her the formal apology of a base commander, whose house had not been in the order he believed it was, and she declined to make him grovel for it. "You didn't put the door on the wedge, General," she said. "You inherited a floor that had stopped checking itself. That's the thing I came to find. Now you've found it too." She told him to keep Castellano close. A master sergeant who had seen the shape of a problem for 2 years and never stopped quietly building the case was worth more than a stack of inspection reports. And she made one request, the only one she made all afternoon, that the young lance corporal who had slid his tray across the table not be folded into the wider mess, because he had done the one right thing in a room full of people doing the easy wrong one, and the service should be careful never to punish that instinct out of a man. The quiet ones keep the receipts. Remember that. The woman who said nothing while a loud man built a case against himself had read the propped door and the false log in the first 90 seconds, and she had let the cameras do the work because she understood that the truth, given enough rope and enough witnesses, hangs the right person on its own. If this story has settled something right in your chest, the patience of it, the way it turned, subscribe to Honor Tales, because we tell the ones where the quiet person was never the weak person, only the one you hadn't placed yet. Before she left, she found Lance Corporal Diego Reyes. He was standing by the serving line, bracing himself, certain that the worst was coming, because he had laughed at the start with the rest of them. She stood in front of him in her gray civilian shirt with the pale blue pin on the collar, and she did not dress him down. "You laughed," she said. "Yes, ma'am," Reyes said. "I did." "I'm sorry." "You did," she agreed. "And then you slid me your tray when a sergeant told you not to. You moved to help when it cost you something." She let that sit. That second part is the part that makes a Marine. The first part is just being 20 and wanting to belong. Everybody's been 20. She looked at him steadily. "Next time, Reyes, don't wait until it's safe. Move first. Be the one who moves first." "Yes, ma'am," Reyes said, and this time it meant something. At dusk, she walked the base memorial wall alone before her flight. Rows of names cut into dark stone, and she found the one her fingers always found. 2 fingers laid flat against the letters. Whitfield, J. She stood with him a while, the way she had stood with him in the lee of the wall, and she said nothing, because there was nothing to say that 15 years had not already said. Her phone buzzed once in her pocket. An unknown sender. She read it standing at the wall and her face went still in the old way, the operational way. Colors at 05. Halcyon is breathing again. The Sahel. They'll want Valkyrie. She looked at the message a long moment, then at the name on the wall. Then she put the phone in her pocket, set 2 fingers once more against the cut stone, and turned toward the flight line, where the lights had come on against the dark. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.